Hey everybody, Matt Johnson here, historian with Marathon of History, and we have this week's episode of Marathon of History Television. And let me tell you, it is a pretty cool one. As you can see behind me here, it's a beautiful summer day now, and we seem to have transitioned from spring, well, actually winter, right into summer. And what represents summer better than baseball? And one thing about baseball is it's been around for a long time, and so have baseball cards. So on today's episode, I'm talking to Chris Gross from Contender Sports Cards about some baseball cards he has, what makes baseball cards valuable, and what you should look for if you're buying cards, as well as a few little things about some different players. And he's going to show us some pretty interesting cards he has. So I'm not going to talk any longer. Here's Chris Gross, Contender Sports Cards. Got all sorts of memorabilia here. You got your photos in the background, and I got my little collection here.
I like it. Is that Dave Winfield? No, that's Delgado. Nice,
Delgado,
nice.
yeah.
Yeah, sweet.
Back from the what was that? The late '90s when the Jays had awesome teams, but New York was just a little bit better.
Yeah, that's right.
Every single year. Well, we might as well just get started, Chris. Instead of
Sure,
me
man.
rehearsing the questions. So, Chris, how long have you been collecting cards? How long have you been in the hobby?
Cards for me goes back like to when I was 8 years old. I started collecting like at the hockey games around town. Like everybody has a good hockey team, so I'd go on Friday nights to see the Hanover Barons play, and I remember they had vending machines there with like those garbage pail kid cards and stuff like that. So I don't know. I started collecting that way. It was
Right.
really fun, but sports cards for me didn't come into play until 2011. Actually, my mother was at a flea market and she called me and she said, "Hey, this guy's got a lot of cards here. Are you interested?" And I said, "Well, what does he have?" And she's like, "Well, he's got this Derek Jeter rookie."
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, "Okay, like, yeah, how much? $15." So I was like, "Let's do it." So that was my first sports card purchase of
Right.
something that I wanted to hold on to long term, and I just thought it would always go up in value. And then that kind of got me thinking, there's got to be more cards out there I can invest in
Right.
rather than just like playing the stock market. It's sports cards is like for me an alternative asset sort of investment, right? Like
Right.
that I look at as has the potential to go up over time, just like stocks or anything. It's
Right.
you know
And
alternative investment. Yep.
right. And it's probably proven to do that with some of your cards, hasn't it? Like go up fairly
Yeah.
substantially.
So in 2019, I was a big fan of Gary Vanderchuk. I don't know if you know Gary V, but
Yep.
he's a motivational speaker online, and he went on a talk show in 2019 where he talked about sports cards, and he was like, "Sports cards is going to be the next big thing," and all this. And I'm just like listening with like open ears, and I'm just
Right.
like, "Preach to me, Gary! Like preach!" So right after I saw that interview, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go with this, and I purchased like 40 jumbo boxes of
Okay.
1989 to 1991 basketball. Lots of Fleer, Upper Deck, hoops. I was basically just going for Jordan cards. That was
Right.
like my number one mission as an investor. I was like, who's the one person out of all the sports I could go for? It just happened to be Jordan because I thought he had a lot of upside, right?
Right.
Um, but my main passion is baseball, and for me, it was a matter of trying to sell some of those cards, those Jordans, in order to fund my PC, which is my personal collection
Okay.
of baseball. And
Right.
so now, when the explosion hit in 2020 and card prices went through the roof, sometimes like 50x,
Wow.
like we saw dramatic increases in pricing across the board on everything. Like I would buy Jordan cards in 2019 in raw ungraded condition for like $1 or two, and then I would sell those cards in 2020, 2021 when the boom hit for
Right.
like $15, $20 each.
Wow.
So massive profit margins, right?
Wow. And was that a
um
pandemic driven thing? Almost like you saw like a lot of hobby stuff just went crazy, just people
Yeah.
People at
People
home and
people were home bored. They
right.
started looking through their old baseball binders and
I think I did
I
that.
yeah, yeah, everybody did.
Yeah, yeah,
And it really triggered a massive spike in sports cards. eBay stuff went crazy.
right,
Uh like auction prices were just insane. It's unexplainable except for like people were just at home bored, right?
right,
Now, prices have come down. They've people are saying there's like, a market stabilization happening, which is true. I believe that. But the prices that things have come down to now are still higher, slightly higher than
right,
what they were pre-pandemic. So we're in a good spot in the sports card market and the
right.
sports card hobby. Um, and what we saw in 2021 at the spike was something we may never see in our lifetime again.
Right,
Maybe,
right.
you know.
Well, and like you say, like you sort of referenced the stock market, it sounds a lot like that, just the spikes and down a bit, and it sounds very similar. Now you mentioned when you got into collecting cards, you bought tons of cards trying to find a Jordan, or Jordans, I should say. Do you still, now that you're into it a lot more, do you still buy cards in that way to try and get a specific one, or do you mostly focus on buy and sell of specific people?
Yeah, I get a lot of requests for top 20 players like
Yeah,
as a seller. So I try to focus on those guys.
right.
And when they have a really big game, like let's say they hit 2 home runs in a game, I'll post that card that day at
Okay.
night, like right after the game.
So you got to stay on
Um,
the sports scores and stats for sure then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's part of being a dealer and a seller is keeping up with the sports because you don't want to miss out on those opportunities because that's when you can make the most profit off your
Right.
cards
Right. Makes
is
sense.
selling at the height, right? But I do buy collections from people for like $300 to $500,
Yeah.
and I'll go through it. And every single time I've made my money back.
Yeah.
Um, it's worked out for me, but I know what to look for, right? Like if you're new to all this and looking up every single card and every single player, I had to do it sort of when I first started.
Yeah.
I knew a little bit about basketball and baseball cards, but over the years, you start to see the same players over and over when you start purchasing collections, and then it's
Right.
easy to just pick those out and put them aside in a pile and
Okay. So
stuff
something
like
that
that.
does take some experience to sort of expedite the process, I guess, would be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's possible to do like if you don't have any expertise or knowledge on the past and players, but it just takes longer. That's all.
Yeah.
And as we all know, time is money, right? So,
That's exactly right. So,
yeah.
how many cards in your collection right now, like your personal collection, would you say you have?
Uh, I mean, graded cards, we're talking in the hundreds, like could be 350 graded cards. Uh, ungraded, I mean, uh, could be 20,000
Jeez.
ungraded.
Wow.
Um,
So
but
just for listeners and for myself even, when you talk about graded and ungraded, now that's been professionally valued. Is that correct?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So there's four major grading companies in the world. There's PSA, which is the biggest. They grade over 1 million cards a month.
Okay.
There's SGC, which is out of Florida, and they grade roughly around 80,000 cards a month.
Okay.
So you can see the difference there
Wow.
between
Yeah.
1 million cards a month and 80,000. But
Yeah.
both companies are just as reputable,
Okay.
just as accurate and consistent. Some people would argue SGC is more consistent with their grading than PSA right now. Um, but PSA ultimately is the company with the best resale value. So you see a lot more collectors for PSA cards than you would for any of the others. The
Okay.
other two in the top four are Beckett, which is BGS, and then there's CSG, which is a division of CGC, CGC is comic book grading,
Okay.
and they recently opened up their own subdivision called CSG for card grading specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. So if anybody out there is going to buy a card, that should be a graded card. Don't spend a lot of money unless it's something that's been graded. Then I would
I
assume.
would recommend buying graded because when you have a number on the graded card that tells you how high it graded, you can get a more accurate price on the internet.
Okay.
Whereas if you buy something that's ungraded just in a top loader, you're unless you're an expert with looking that card over and looking at all the corners and edges and surface and all the things that go into grading a card,
Yeah.
you might overpay. You might pay $20 for a card and it has a really bad corner,
Okay.
meaning that when you actually grade that card, it's not going to grade very high and you're probably going to lose money on the resale.
Okay.
So developing an eye for pre-grading was very crucial for me in building my personal collection
Right.
because I started learning how to pre-grade and then I could buy those cards to grade.
Okay.
and
Okay.
and that's where I found like cards. I would buy cards for $5 ungraded, and then I would grade it for $30. So I'm
Okay.
35 all in. And if that comes back a 9 or a 10, which most of the time they do, then I see big profits where I can charge for the card anywhere from 80 to $160.
Right. Right.
So
Right. Okay. That actually might
yeah,
be an interesting topic to talk about in the future. Just what they look for in grading. Maybe on a
yeah,
future episode,
yeah.
we'll get you back for that. So I understand you have a few cards to show us and talk about today, Chris. What do
Yeah,
you?
if you want to see some vintage stuff that I
Yeah.
have, I
Let's
can
let's
show
check out
you.
some vintage cards. Sure.
Sure, sure. I'll show you some of the greats. So we'll start with a '58 Mickey Mantle All Star. That's this one right here.
Wow.
Now this is graded by SGC, and SGC is known for doing vintage grading.
Okay.
Even today with PSA grading over 1 million cards a month, SGC still has the biggest numbers when it comes to grading vintage. So that just shows you that collectors trust the vintage market with SGC
Right.
uh,
Right.
over PSA. Um, Probably because SGC was known for vintage, but they have recently, over the last 5 years, got heavy into the modern market as well.
Right.
So you see a lot more of these slabs. The difference between PSA slabs and these slabs is this slab has a black border. It's called the tuxedo.
Okay.
And a lot of collectors like it because you can focus on the card, whereas the PSA slabs, they have like a clear sort of cloudy background.
Okay.
um, for the vintage, the black just makes it pop, right?
Right.
So
Right. Absolutely.
that's why.
So
Yeah,
is that like in there, or is that hard to take that out, or
yeah, I can't get this out unless I crack it out with like some pliers and
and you're not going
some
to do that with
screwdrivers.
the 58 Mickey Mantle?
Probably not. I mean, it's probably just going to appreciate in value over time.
Right.
So I'll just keep it in this slab. If I ever wanted to one day crack it out, it's not too hard to do. You just
Yeah.
snip off the corners, and then you just have to get a screwdriver in there and pry it open and
Okay.
basically separate the plexi.
Okay.
Um,
So if you don't
but
mind me
yep,
asking, what would
sure.
that one be? What would that one be worth as it sits there if you were to sell it?
So this one sold last year for $320
Okay.
in this grade, which is not bad.
Yeah.
I'm hoping in 20 years this will probably be 800 to $1,000.
Right on.
Uh, I don't know if it will or not, but there is a company called Fanatics, and they are well known around the world for their jerseys. They're like a $30 billion company, and they recently bought all the rights to sports card licenses, football, basketball, and baseball
Oh
right
wow.
now. So they're going to be a big player, and their plan is to increase the sports card hobby by 10 times.
Wow.
So
Okay.
getting that many more people involved, you'll start seeing sports card commercials.
Right.
They'll start advertising in places like China and try to get those big markets
Oh,
involved.
okay. Right.
Um, so who knows what this card is going to do in the next 20 or 30 years, but for me it's a long-term investment
Yeah.
because Mantle is one of the best switch hitters of all time, arguably one of the best baseball players of all time.
Yeah.
So Hall of Famer and a keeper for sure.
For sure.
I got a few more here. I got a Willie Mays. This is a 1959 Tops, and you can see that that's an NSGC as well. These are just like mid-level grades, low to mid-level.
Okay.
I don't have anything in like a 7 or 8 in these cards. Those would be big, high-value dollar cards.
And is
We're
that just
talking in the thousands.
because they're older and they've been handled for years? Is that why it's probably harder to get a higher grade?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people, their mothers back in the day would throw these out, uh, or they'd put them in bike spokes, the
Bike spokes,
kids,
yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah. Uh, so it is hard to find a really well, good condition
Yeah, yeah.
vintage card. Even though this card probably didn't need to get graded because it's not perfect. It does have some corner issues and there's some staining on the back, which is why it received that grade.
Okay.
Um, I just like them for my personal collection to all be encased in a
Yep, yep.
protective plexi from the elements, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
so that
All right.
way the condition of the card stays the same over time.
Right.
Because if you have a card that's in a top loader, which is perfectly fine, uh, air gets in the top, and over time it'll end up like browning the top of the card.
Okay.
So if you take it out in 30 years, you'll see that it's faded, kind of like a lighter brown on the top of the card. So
Okay. Interesting.
here's a Hank Aaron.
Awesome.
This one is also a 59. I'm gonna show you all these sort of 59s because they're all yellow. They're all kind of the same, uh, which I like. These are the oldest cards of these big sluggers that I have.
Okay.
I have like 5 of each in different vintage years, but these are the oldest, so I thought I would show these.
Have the photos changed a lot over the years? Like I noticed the last couple are just them basically standing there. Has the photography changed more to action shots or still a mix?
Yeah, back in the day, like the 50s, 60s, it was a lot of just stuff like this.
Yeah,
But once the 70s hit, you start seeing more action shots, stuff like that.
right.
They even used to have cards back in the day, like this one here with Mantle, where it almost looks like an artist sort
Oh
of
yeah.
rendition, right? So
Yeah, neat.
yeah,
That's really cool. I like that one. Yeah.
yeah, they don't do that anymore.
No.
They do have some cartoon stuff they're experimenting with autographs, but with the modern, but
Right.
it's not as nice as this old stuff.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then I just got Bob Clemente, Roberto Clemente, who famously died in the plane crash, and he hit 3,000 hits in his career exactly. They changed the rules actually for baseball for Hall of Fame eligibility based on Roberto Clemente.
Okay, I didn't know
Um,
that.
yeah, because before it used to be 5 years. I believe you had to wait 5 years to be on the ballot once you retired as a player, but they changed it once he died
Okay.
to get him in right away. I think they changed it to 5 months
Okay.
or something like that. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
pretty sure it's
interesting.
5 months. Yeah. And then I have a Sandy Koufax, and this is a 58. And he was arguably one of the best pitchers of all time. Interesting
Awesome.
thing about his career is for the first half of his career, he had a losing record. It was like 30 and 46 or something like that, or 30 and I'd have to look it up,
Yeah, yeah.
but it was a losing record for the first half, and then for the second half, he figured out a way to pitch better, and he just completely dominated.
Wow.
And his like final career record was like something like 186 over 87. So
That's a
186 wins and 87 losses. Like it's
that's a
something
good
like that.
second half. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But wow, like what a turnaround. So
And it's funny
this
to
guy,
think like he developed that later in his career, that ability to think that maybe, even nowadays teams might have just dropped him. And look at that talent they would have missed out on, if he
it
didn't
still happens
progress. And
today. Like look at Jose Batista, for
that's a really good
example.
example. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when he was with Pittsburgh, he wasn't playing good. Once
Yeah.
he came to Toronto and he got all new coaches, he figured out a way to find his swing, and then he just became one of the most powerful hitters in baseball, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good
yeah.
example. Yeah.
hmm
Cool. Got anything
Um,
else, Chris?
Well, do you want to see some newer stuff? This is a Mike Trout autograph. This one's out of 30, and you can
Okay.
see that the slab that this one in is a PSA slab.
Okay, I see what you mean about the clear slab. Yeah.
Yeah, and there is a lot more PSA collectors, so they prefer these kind of slabs. They're a little skinnier than the SGC slabs. Uh, it's all the same on the top with the label. It's always red and white. This one only graded an 8 because there is a corner ding on the back. You can't see it from the front, but there is a small corner ding
Okay.
on the back. So that pretty much, and it might be a little off center, but that would be the reasoning for the 8. But this one is out of 30, so there was only 30 made, and it is a refractor, which means you see the rainbow colors in the light.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Yep. So it shines, and then the autograph as well. So that
Who
one's really
now?
neat.
Where did the autograph come from? Was that on the card, or did somebody get that
Yeah,
signed?
this came in a pack, so directly
Okay.
from the factory. He would have signed 30 of these cards. So that one's a good one.
Yep.
One of my favorites because Mike Trout is the goat of the new era, what
Yeah,
a lot of
absolutely.
people call Mickey Mantle of the new era. And then I'll show you a Beckett slab,
Sure.
and this is a Bryce Harper rookie, and this one is autographed, and it's out of 99.
Wow.
So that's a beauty. And that one I think sold last year for 1,200 bucks.
Okay. Yeah, that is a beauty for sure.
Just because it's the rookie and
Yeah.
it's the auto and it's serial numbered out of 99. So, and you can see the Beckett slab is, it's neat. You can see the label there.
Yep.
A lot of people don't really like the Beckett label. They think the 9 should be gold rather than silver. The thing about Beckett is they have a pristine, like not pristine, but gem mint card in a 9.5 as opposed to a 10.
Okay.
So in PSA and SGC and CSG, they all go to 10 grade, whereas Beckett's grade maxes out at a 9.5.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
considered their gem mint, right?
Right.
So yeah, so
Oh, that's awesome.
that's two goats of the modern era right there. And I'm glad to have their cards.
So a question with autographs. So if you had a card, say you had a Mike Trout card and you ran into him at a show or a game and he autographed it, does that increase the value or does that do anything to the card? Or is it just kind of like a card with a signature on it if you actually get it done yourself?
So it would increase the value,
Yeah,
but you would have to get it certified by PSA, and you
that
would
it's
have to
his
go
signature.
through. Yeah, you would have
Yeah.
to go through something called PSA DNA, and
Okay.
it's part of their services they offer, where they will authenticate a card that's not factory made. So these cards here, they came out of factory pulls, um, and packs and stuff, but if the card was hand signed, you would have to go through PSA DNA in order for them to slab it and say, this is an authentic signature.
Right.
Um, and then they can give it a grade as well if you elect for that service.
Okay. Right on.
Yeah.
Well,
hmm
that's good to know, and that's really interesting stuff, Chris. So you do buy collections then if people have cards and whatnot. How can people even check out your cards, check out what you have, get in touch with you?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm Contender Sports Cards on Instagram. And if you want to get a hold of me by email, it's Christopher Michael Gross at hotmail.com. I am buying collections when I have the money for that. So if you have some cards that you're just curious about value, I can give you a quick idea of, 1 to 5 cards if you have a
Okay.
few of those. Otherwise, if you're looking for me to buy, that's possible too. It just all depends what it is because there is the junk wax era, which was 1985 to 1995. And a lot of those cards, unfortunately, is what people have for their collections. And
Right.
they're not worth a lot of money because what happened was they overproduced in those years, specifically for baseball cards. It just created too much supply and not enough demand.
Okay. Okay.
and that is the big problem. You can still buy skids of the junk wax era
Oh, wow.
stuff. Yeah, like that's how much there is out there.
Wow.
And so people don't really understand why their 1985 to 1995 cards aren't worth much. It's because of too much supply.
Okay.
So when you
Interesting.
have a million cards out there of one card, you know, it's not the same as like 30,000 cards of the same card,
I
right?
see.
Like, so
I see. So
yeah,
that's a really good example of just because something's old doesn't mean it's valuable.
exactly.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah,
you
for
have
sure.
vintage, if you have some vintage stuff that's pre 85, there is value in there. And like I said, in terms of rookies and things like that, there's always going to be like the Jeter rookies, and he was 93 to 96. Like those are considered Jeter rookies. Frank Thomas rookies,
Right.
1990. Like in 1989, Ken Griffey Jr. rookies. Like these cards are desirable, but usually only in high grade. So
Right. Okay.
they have to be really like well preserved cards,
Yeah.
and if they're graded high, you can sell them, but they still don't sell for massive prices
Right. Right.
unless they're in a 10 grade or something like that. So
Okay. Cool. Well, that's great, Chris. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, coming on the TV show, and we'll definitely have you on here again. I got a bunch of questions, but we're just out of time. So,
yeah, sounds good. Well, thanks a lot, Matt. I appreciate it, and thanks to all your viewers. And please check me out on Instagram, Contender Sports Cards, and I like your little figures in the front there.
yeah, absolutely. Little Carlos Delgado, he was my favorite.
Nice, nice.
Cool. All right. No, that's great. Awesome, Chris. I appreciate that. That was very informative. Well, that was definitely an excellent episode, and I really enjoyed talking to Chris. He's very knowledgeable, and we're gonna have Chris on the show a lot more. And if you want to learn a little more about baseball in general, check out the fall 2022 issue of Marathon of History magazine. There's a really cool story in there about the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, and that's very interesting. It's just in St. Mary's, so not too far away from pretty well everywhere. And it's definitely worth a read. And we're going to have a little more about baseball coming up, as well as Chris is going to be a regular guest on Marathon of History Television. So again, thank you all very much for watching. And until next month, I'm Matt Johnson.